Liberalism 2, Inconsistency in Liberal Philosophy. This week, a member of the New South Wales Liberal government, Peter Phelps, made two comments that were juxtaposed in a Sydney Morning Herald, yes, that bastion of the left, in a Sydney Morning Herald article. But he doesn't deny these comments, so let's go with them. One was that I think traffic lights were, if I remember correctly, a Bolshevist menace or something of that nature, whereas roundabouts are the epitome of freedom. The other comment that he made, and I quote, "Libertarian support for unrestricted drug use is clearly based on the need for relief from listening to other libertarians." I've edited that for grammar, by the way. Now, these are an example of fundamental right-wing hypocrisy. We on the right view economic and personal freedom as fundamental. This means that, barring really strong evidence to the contrary for a necessity to curtail freedom, any decision should be presumed to side with personal freedom, to allow people to make choices. Now, I don't really take a view on the traffic lights versus roundabouts perspective. There actually may be economic reasons for having roundabouts in terms of fuel consumption, but given the level of traffic in Sydney at the moment, I'm not sure either of them are solving any problems. But why do we have traffic lights, and frankly, why do most Liberals feel comfortable with them? Primarily because we as Liberals understand that in certain circumstances where there is a failure of essentially perfect market conditions, people aren't well informed, or people will take decisions individually that harm them once aggregated across the economy, we need to give up our freedoms. The fact that we have a national defence force is an understanding that sometimes we need to sacrifice one freedom for a greater freedom. So there are trade-offs. The fact that we have a national justice system, or state justice systems and the national justice system, is a reflection of the fact that consistency in the application of justice is achieved better through a nationalised system than through individual contracts, where people don't necessarily have the same amount of power on both sides of the contracting relation. So we as Liberals agree that freedom sometimes has to be sacrificed. So I guess the question then becomes, when should freedom be sacrificed? Okay, let's turn to drugs, because I'm a little bit naive. I didn't start drinking until I finished uni. I don't think I've done any drugs of any note, except for all these damn painkillers, but that's a health issue, so let's leave that aside. So, what is it about drugs that makes the right foam at the mouth excessively? On the other hand, what is it about drugs that make some on the left go la-di-da? Look, we all know from the evidence that drugs cause serious health and societal problems. We know from many examples of prohibition that making drugs illegal doesn't solve the problem. Prohibition of alcohol in the United States early last century led to insane amounts of crime. Why? If you make certain activities illegal, one of the first effects is to increase the risk of getting caught. You increase risk, people get in there for more return. Okay, let's apply that to drugs. Drugs are illegal, hence they are costly, because the cost of drugs must price in the risk of getting caught. Because they are costly, drug users, who are going to exist anyway, will need more money to consume those drugs than they otherwise might. This essentially means that a large proportion of property crime is due to people who use drugs, and indirectly to the fact that there is so much money in drugs, and thereby to the fact that drugs are illegal. Now, given that people are going to use drugs no matter what do we suffer from having illegal drugs? We suffer, firstly, potential deaths from the fact that you have no guarantees as to purity or consistency. Individual contracting is not a solution where information is incomplete. So why do we have drug overdoses? Because people have no guarantees as to the quality of those drugs. That might be an argument. That's an argument relating to regulation because there's a market failure there. Information is incomplete. The market cannot perfectly work. Secondly, there is money in drugs, and this means that people are going to commit property crime. Now, I might say, let's legalise drugs because I want to go soft on drug dealers and blah, blah, blah. Look, the left wing might take that attitude, that we shouldn't punish people for bad decisions, whatever. The right-wing perspective is a lot more pragmatic, or should be a lot more pragmatic. These people cause property crime. I don't want to have my house robbed. Therefore, if we make drugs legal, they will be priced excluding risk. Their price will be a lot lower. And druggies will not have to break into my house to feed their habit. There, 50% of property crime, gone like that. So even if you don't believe we need to help these people, and you are an extreme right-winger, it makes economic sense to make drugs legal. Okay, how do we deal with the poor sods who take drugs? Well, ultimately, being a liberal is about enhancing personal choice. So long as you have sufficient information, if you make them legal, you ensure quality is consistent, and you tell people about the risks, and hell, we all get that in school, then you make your own choice. And maybe we price health insurance for those guys differently. So long as we give people information, we allow them to make their own choices, that is a liberal perspective on drugs. And at least we won't suffer so much property crime, those of us who don't use drugs. So, is there some inconsistency? Yes, I really hate it when we run around talking about personal and economic freedom for some things, but it seems inconsistent and it's not clear why certain things are in and certain things are out. While we're at it, since we're talking about drugs, let's talk about another relevant topic, gay marriage. My view as a liberal is that society should not interfere in anything that doesn't harm anybody else. So do whatever you want with anybody else, so long as it doesn't harm anybody else. In those terms, gay marriage is okay. So as a liberal, I would say, yes, go for it. But here's where liberals become hypocrites. There's a part of my upbringing, whether it be the religious part or whether it just be the fact that I grew up in a relatively conservative household, that makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. When I see guys kissing, I feel a little bit uncomfortable. When I hear about gay marriage, I feel a little bit uncomfortable. But hey, that's my problem. It's not their problem. They're not hurting me. I don't have to look at certain things if I don't want to. So, I'm all for saying, let's give them the same rights. That's the end of my liberal philosophy. Me, as a slightly conservative person, I would just say, maybe let's not call it marriage. Give them all the same rights, let them go through all the same ceremonies. Call it something else. Okay, I'm a hypocrite. But I am for personal freedom. Let's leave it there.